Buddhism in the West has today, to a large extent, been torn from its deep philosophical and metaphysical basis, and is now presented in a much more shallow form. This process has been explored in this book, Mindfulness, which indicates how really just the introductory, more shallow aspects of meditation are used now in the so-called mindfulness revolution. The original aim of meditation was direct insight to the ultimate nature of reality. Even in the early Theravada texts, the Buddha was teaching the path to enlightenment, and enlightenment was direct perception of the ultimate nature of reality. Whereas today, in the mindfulness revolution, Buddhism is now employed to have a peaceful state of mind whilst doing the washing up. In this revolution, or so-called revolution, which adapts Buddhist ideas for the West, and in so doing to a large extent dumbs them down to an appalling extent, the idea that Buddhism contains deep logical and metaphysical analysis falls by the wayside, except amongst a band of academic scholars who, rather than exploring the path to enlightenment, to a large extent become fascinated by the purely philosophical and analytical aspects of the astonishing precision and depth and extent of Buddhist philosophy, which to my mind goes way beyond any Western philosophy. But unless you've read deeply in the texts of Madhyamika, Yogacara, Dzogchen, Mahamudra philosophy, you will not know this. This is a very useful book introducing the Prasangika Madhyamika view of logical analysis, debate in Tibetan Buddhism by Daniel E. Perdue. You see, it's a pretty thick book, and it goes through the logical analyses used by Tibetan monks in their investigation of the metaphysical functioning of reality. And the point here is that if you are analysing from a logical, philosophical point of view, the metaphysical, epistemological and ontological, metaphysics is kind of a combination of epistemology and ontology, but we're dealing with how we know things and what we know and how we can actually validate our insights. These are the kind of logical investigations carried out in search of such validation. And in the same way that physicists would not think of making up their own mathematical procedures not used by anybody else, in order to pursue their research in the physical world, unless of course they suddenly discover some new mathematical structure which can be validated within the existing modes of mathematical analysis. That's a different issue. But if I was doing a bit of physical analysis in physics and I was doing a bit of maths and I think, oh dear me, this mathematics equation doesn't work, I know, I'll just stick something in here to make it work. Physicists and mathematicians would laugh at me. But this is precisely what people like Rovelli and Hofstadter and Sean Carroll do. Again, I'm not talking about what they do when they're doing mathematics. They wouldn't be in the jobs they're in if they did it in mathematics. But they regularly use completely fraudulent philosophical conceptual analysis in their popular books and when they go on YouTube to give their lectures and talks and promote their books. The central purposes of Tibetan monastic debate are to defeat misconceptions, to establish correct view. To these ends, with great effort, the Gelugpa monks engage in debate diligently, seeking to learn well the words and to understand fully the meaning of the Buddhist doctrine. In the greater Tibetan monasteries, the principal means of learning is debate. The purpose of debate is not to defeat and embarrass a mistaken opponent, thereby gaining some victory for oneself. Rather, the purpose is to help the opponent overcome wrong view. One of the things which is interesting when you read texts such as this is the way in which consciousness is spoken about as if it had its own internal validity, its own internal nature. A wrong consciousness is necessarily discordant with the fact. Such a consciousness cannot realize its object and is mistaken with respect to it. Wrong consciousnesses are either non-conceptual, such as conceiving the existence of a substantially existent self. Non-conceptual wrong consciousnesses are merely mistaken with regard to their objects of engagement. Conceptual wrong consciousnesses are doubly mistaken, for they are mistaken with regard to their objects of engagement, such as conceiving a person as substantially existent, whereas no such person exists. And they are also mistaken with regard to their appearing objects, which in this case is an internal mental image of a substantially existent self. From this perspective, you can see it is thought that, if you like, each sentient being has their own stream of consciousness which has certain habitual modes of perception which can almost be considered to be substantial forms, although they are immaterial substantial forms, but they endure over time within the mind stream of that person, and they will affect dramatically the way the person engages with the world, conceives of the world. Now, in order to undermine such wrong views, conceptual logic is used. But within Buddhism, it is taken as foundational that consciousness has its own inner coherence. And in the same way as consciousness recognises mathematical validity, we can go into that when we look at Gödel's theorem, there are certain coherent modes of logical thought which are coherent and those which are incoherent. And these are explored in large texts such as this. One of the most ludicrous forms of logical incoherence is the view that if you assert that something has absolutely no qualities whatsoever of a certain type and can have no association with qualities of that type, you then at a later point in the argument say, well, if I put enough of them together it can magically produce qualities of that type. This is ruled out quite clearly. But today, physicists and Western philosophers regularly use such nonsensical modes of discourse and what they think, presumably, is logical exposition. Extraordinary. Purdue tells us in the Debate in Tibetan Buddhism book that Gelugpa present a path to liberation which invariably involves reasoning. The stated purpose for Buddhist reasoning is the development of yogic direct perceivers, realizing subtle impermanence. The mind and body are selfless, for example. Only yogic direct perceivers can serve as an antidote to the ignorance that binds one to the suffering of cyclic existence. Such consciousnesses are produced independence on a very stable and insightful mind developed by the power of meditation. So, within the process of Tibetan Buddhism, deepening one's insight into nature reality, it is not just logic which is used. It is logic combined with meditation. When you understand that consciousness has its own valid ontological basis, it is a fundamental aspect, the process of reality. And each sentient being has their own internal stream at the higher levels of individuated consciousness. So the logical analysis is not just done for the sake of, passing an exam or textbook learning. You meditate on it. You meditate on it to develop yogic direct perceivers. And these yogic direct perceivers become stable parts of the stream of consciousness. They're not just mere intellectual understanding. They are part of the deep layers of consciousness which make up the human being concerned. So you have the logical analysis, the meditation or direct perception developed through meditation on the results of logical analysis, producing stabilized awarenesses within the stream of consciousness. This is part of the path to enlightenment. So we have logical analysis, stabilising the conclusion of logical analysis as part of the stream of consciousness, which means you're transforming your consciousness towards an understanding which moves your mind towards enlightenment. None of this would be possible if consciousness didn't have its own valid basis in the process of reality. Now, we have to come to Rovelli's ideas about Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna's stanzas are part of, what should we call it, paradoxical logical reasoning used in meditational development of consciousness towards understanding the deep nature of reality. In a sense, Nagarjuna uses logic to destroy logic. But it doesn't use logic to destroy logic in the sense of after you've done Nagarjuna you realise all logical thought is pointless. This is not the case at all. Logical analysis in the conventional everyday world is absolutely essential. We wouldn't be able to build bridges without it, for example. Well, that's an obvious example. However, when one wants to approach the deep layers of consciousness beneath the conventional world, then it is necessary to pass through a doorway beyond logic, a doorway which enters or provides the path beyond logic. It doesn't invalidate logic. It just means that on this level of consciousness logic does not apply. And we'll see exactly in a moment that the paradoxical logical configuration of emptiness, Nagarjuna's emptiness, is precisely the same as the existential configuration of a quantum field. However, returning to Nagarjuna's verses, the following verse is from the section Analysis of Conditions from Nagarjuna's Madhyamika Nagarjuna, which is fundamental verses of the middle way. This is from the J. Garfield translation, which is the one Rovelli refers to. Neither from itself, nor from another, nor from both, nor without a cause, does anything whatever, anywhere, arise. Now this seems like almost pointless paradox. And on initial meeting it, it's very difficult to understand what it could possibly mean. Quite often Western philosophers treat this stuff as if it's just logical wordplay. It's not. When I was staying at the Bodhisattva Centre in Brighton, I was resident there for a while, I was talking to one of the people who did actually know quite a lot about this stuff. And he said, well actually, this isn't logical wordplay, it's about substantial coming into being of the material world. How could the material world possibly come into existence? What kind of causes could cause the substantial world to come into existence? And within Buddhist philosophy, and this is something which was also common to other Indian philosophical schools, there are four possibilities to consider. Can a material object be its own cause? Does it require something completely other to it to be its cause? Does it need its own cause and another cause? Or does it have absolutely no cause whatsoever? Now I'm just going to deal with the first possibility, because going into all the logical possibilities of substantial arising requires we go into much deeper analysis. But to understand how we're going to proceed with this analysis, we've got to understand we're viewing this through the lens of substantial inherent existence. We're assuming that the material world exists as a material world, and objects are self-contained bits and pieces of the world which are not related to other objects. Now, of course, Rovelli is going to say, well, they are related, yes, but this is not the way that ordinary people deal with or experience the material world. And what this stuff is about is actually deconstructing false perceptions of how the world functions. So if a material object were to be a substantially existent, inherently existent piece of stuff, then its properties would be also inherent and part of its inner nature. These are the kind of explanations which go along with this verse, and without it the verse makes no sense. Within the Madhyamika, an inherently existent object, which is the way that most sentient beings conceive the world to be constructed. So an inherently existent atom, for instance, would have to be changeless. So if this atom, for example, were to be an atom which was arisen, caused by itself, then it couldn't stop causing itself, because if an atom caused itself at one moment and then stopped causing itself, it would have changed. So it would not be an inherently existent object. Again, you've got to understand that this analysis is an analysis of what the world would be like if it was inherently existent, and that all atoms were changed as substantial entities. This is what we're looking at here. So if such an atom was self-caused, then it could never stop causing itself. So it would never be able to stop causing itself and would never get around to entering into any other causal processes. And the entire world would collapse into non-functional mess of nothingness, I suppose, or just an infinite pool of non-functioning atoms. We can look at a couple of other of the logical discussions from this book, Ornament of Reason, which is one of the translations and commentaries on Nagarjuna's fundamental verses. So if something's not established in itself, it's got no internal essence. in which case it can't produce anything, so it won't be able to produce itself. So what's been said here is the point where this thing is not arisen, then it's got no essence, so there's no way it could possibly create itself. There's nothing there to create itself from. Something that is established, however, is already existent, already has its own essence. So producing itself again would be meaningless. Thus the entire idea of self-causation falls into a logical mess of contradictoriness, implausibility, impossibility. But as I say, this analysis is not just meant to be done for logical entertainment. It should become a meditation object, which enables you to actually produce a direct yogic perceiver of emptiness. When I was staying and practicing at the Bodhisattva Centre in Brighton, I used to meditate on these kind of analysis quite a bit. And sometimes I had extraordinary experiences. It is as if a kind of doorway opens in the mind and some point in the mind falls through into another dimension of spaciousness. All I can tell you is it happened. And for a time, maybe a couple of days, I felt as if I was floating on my feet, and that the world vibrated with a deeper meaningfulness. And strangely, the only other time I experienced that was when I almost died. I was in hospital because I was very seriously ill, and I was told that I was lucky to be alive. And when I came out, the world glowed in exactly the same way. Quite extraordinary. And this is how the Madhyamika is not just a piece of logical calisthenics. Can be used like that, but it's not just that. These are deep meditation objects to open up a doorway into emptiness. Now, I've spoken to some people who have read Rovelli's book, and they say, well, Rovelli's book has a very similar effect upon them. And this may be true on a superficial level. However, the huge difference is that Rovelli has just assassinated consciousness, he's assassinated mind. So once you go through the doorway of Rovelli's Nagarjuna, of Rovelli's relational world, there is nothing left. So the last paragraph in Rovelli's chapter on Nagarjuna is as follows. For me as a human being, Nagarjuna teaches the serenity, the lightness, and the shining beauty of the world. We are nothing but images of images. Reality, including ourselves, is nothing but a thin and fragile veil, beyond which there is nothing. Let me repeat. Rovelli tells us Nagarjuna's philosophy leaves us with nothing. But this is entirely incorrect. Nagarjuna was not a nihilist. If you read Madhyamika texts, they repeat over and over again that to be a nihilist is basically to miss the point completely. So here's a book going through various Buddhist philosophers who came after Nagarjuna, explaining Nagarjuna's thought and the thought of the Madhyamika. A Dose of Emptiness, which is a translation of a Tibetan text by Cabizon. And we read in here, neither existence nor non-existence, nor both, nor is it not of the nature of both. It is freedom from these four extremes, thus the Madhyamika understands. To claim existence is to grasp at eternalism. To claim non-existence is to grasp at nihilism. So Rovelli gets it wrong. As I say, having assassinated consciousness and mind, going through the door of emptiness leaves you in complete nothingness, as Rovelli says. But Nagarjuna leaves you hovering between extremes. It does not leave you in nothingness. And it's exactly hovering in between these extremes of existence, non-existence, not both, not neither, which is the nature of ultimate mind. Nagarjuna did not ultimate mind, not conventional individuated mind, primordial mind. Nagarjuna did not just produce the paradoxes which have become central to the Madhyamika. He also wrote stuff which is more in line with the Yogacara and the mind-only perspective. Yogacara, crudely speaking, is consciousness only, Vijnanavada. In praise of Dharmadatu. Dharmadhatu is the ultimate space of phenomena. I'll show in another video that it corresponds exactly to the quantum realm of potentiality, the Buddhist Dharmadhatu. The Dharmakaya is the mind aspect of the Dharmadhatu. Dharmakaya is the mind aspect also of the ultimate quantum field. So, I mean, Rovelli is just focused on Nagarjuna's Madhyamika works and has misunderstood them by giving a nihilist interpretation, which he can't avoid, although actually he does say in his text that Nagarjuna is not a nihilist, but I mean his final description of Nagarjuna is thoroughly nihilistic. But Rovelli's presentation, wherein there's nothing beyond relationships between material bits and pieces, is completely nihilistic. There's nothing beyond the material world of relationships. Obviously nihilistic. Brunherzel talks about Nagarjuna's father. As much as some people might like to do so, it is impossible to restrict his approach solely to negative or deconstructive rhetoric, as typically found in his classical Madhyamika works. Even these texts sometimes deviate from such a style, let alone some of his other texts, in which he uses affirmative terminologies, even with regard to the ultimate. Is that from time to time, even in the fundamental verses, Nagarjuna makes statements which have a positive content. It's not all negative deconstruction. For example, if we go back to Mabja Jangchup Songdru, commentary to Nagarjuna. This is in the section Analysis of Self and Phenomena, and the verse from Nagarjuna is, not known by anything else, peace, not constructed through constructs, absence of concepts, and absent of a different meaning. These are the characteristics of reality. It has already been explained that if examined with respect to its nature, the essence of the ultimate, or the bearer of its characteristics, transcends the realm of speech and mind. And mind here means individuated mind. It is therefore also taught that since there is nothing to support the characteristics of ultimate reality, there are no characteristics either. Still, just as its essence is taught by means of superimposition, the characteristics of ultimate reality must be explained by way of superimposition as well. Now the point here is that ultimate reality is said to be beyond concepts here, but it's not non-existent. It's not existent either. It is beyond all such constructs, but this does not make it nothingness. Awareness of the ultimate Awareness of the ultimate occurs through individual self-awareness within the equipoise of the noble ones. Noble ones are enlightened. Reality is peace because from the beginning it has no essential establishment whatsoever. It is not a construct of language, for reality is not a linguistically constructed meaning, nor is it something that can be conceived and expressed. Reality does not constitute any different meaning because dissimilar instances have no place within the basic field of phenomena to which all phenomena belong. Well, this is the Dharmadhatu. So Nagarjuna is actually describing the Dharmadhatu, the field of all phenomena, the space of all phenomena. The major examples for Nagarjuna's positive descriptions of the nature of phenomena, the luminous nature of mind, are found in examples given below. So here are some quotes from Nagarjuna. Not known through something other, peaceful, not referential through any reference points, without conceptions and without distinctions. These are the characteristics of true reality. The mind is arrayed through latent tendencies. Freedom from latent tendencies is bliss. The blissful mind is peacefulness. A peaceful mind will not be ignorant. Not to be ignorant is the realization of true reality. The realization of true reality is the attainment of liberation. Through this, they see that for themselves there is neither samsara nor nirvana. Stainless, changeless luminosity throughout beginning, middle and end. And I've had this experience by using Nagarjuna's doorway into emptiness when I used to meditate regularly at the Bodhisattva Center, and I can still do it to some extent today. I'm very lazy, can't figure out why. It's an amazing experience, but I seem to get on with other stuff. But anyway, if you do this, you go through a doorway using the paradoxes of Nagarjuna, but you don't go into nothingness, you go into luminous mind, non-conceptual, blissful, non-dual awareness. As the Zen master Hang Po says, this pure mind, the source of everything, shines forever on all with the brilliance of its own perfection. But the people of the world do not awake to it, regarding only that which sees, hears, feels, and knows as mind. Blinded by their own sight, hearing, feeling, and knowing, they do not perceive the spiritual brilliance of the source substance. If they would only eliminate all conceptual thought in a flash, the source substance would manifest itself like the sun ascending through the void and illuminating the whole universe without hindrance or bounds. I said earlier on that I would demonstrate how the configuration of existence, or the existential configuration of quantum fields, which is basically a quantum superposition, which we'll go into in a moment, is the same as the Dharmadhatu, which is the ultimate space of phenomena as described within Buddhist metaphysics. Here is a description of the Dharmadhatu. This is from Tukul Urgen Rinpoche. The main image of Dharmadhatu is that of space, the space of all things, within which all phenomena manifest, abide and dissolve back into. Dharmadhatu is the basic environment of all phenomena. It encompasses whatever appears and exists, including the worlds and all beings. And the Dharmadhatu is said to have, or can be analysed and seen to have, aspects of both potentiality and mind, or primordial mind. Potentiality manifests as the appearance of material entities, and primordial mind manifests within sentient beings as individuated mind. Both these aspects arise on the basis of the existence of the Dharmadhatu, which is the ultimate field or space of all phenomena. So one can see the Dharmadhatu is clearly analogous or identical to, depending on how strongly you want to make the equivalence, the quantum field, the ultimate quantum field. Lisa Randall, who is a quantum physicist, gives the following description of quantum fields. Quantum field theory, the tool with which we study particles, is based upon eternal, omnipresent objects that can create and destroy these particles. These objects are the fields of quantum field theory. Quantum fields are objects that permeate space-time. They create or absorb elementary particles. Particles can be produced and destroyed anywhere at any time. So you see, quantum fields are the fields of potentiality, that the immaterial fields of potentiality from which particles emerge and are absorbed. In this case we see a description of the quantum field as relating to the Dharmadhatu in its potentiality to manifest the material world aspect. Now we know quantum physicists just want to ignore the fact that the evidence that quantum fields must have an internal aspect of consciousness, so they never talk about it. But as we've seen, there is nowhere else where consciousness can emerge from. Quantum fields produce the appearance of the material world and the inner glow of the ground of being, which becomes individuated consciousness. So in fact, quantum fields are clearly equivalent to, in metaphysical terms, to the Dharmadhatu. Now, the Dharmadhatu will have the configuration, the existential configuration of emptiness. So what is the existential configuration of emptiness? Well, Nagarjuna and other Buddhist philosophers have expressed the existential configuration of emptiness on many occasions. For example, its character is neither existent nor non-existent, nor both existent and non-existent, nor neither. The Madhyamika master Viveka, who was around about the same time as Nagarjuna, indicated that the nature of emptiness is as follows: neither existent nor non-existent, nor both existent and non-existent, nor neither. True reality is free from these four possibilities. And another depiction of ultimate reality is everything is real and not real. Both real and not real, neither real nor not real. This is the Lord Buddha's teaching. So the most precise definition within the Madhyamika exposition of emptiness is neither existence nor non-existent, nor both of these, nor neither of these. Now, let us turn to another book by a quantum physicist, sneaking a look at God's cards, unraveling the mysteries of quantum physics. In this book, Girardi gives a quite clear indication of the existential configuration of quantum fields, which are in a state of superposition. Girardi discusses the quantum superposition principle, which in very crude terms states that at the quantum level entities don't necessarily have to be in one place. They can be smeared out, some people would say, or potentially in two places at the same time. They're kind of half in one place and half in another place, or they hover between existence in both places. There is an exact quantum formula to express this, expressing this in very crude terms. But basically, the quantum entity is a field of potentiality which is spread over two places. Now, in a similar way to Schrödinger, when he considered his cat, famous Schrödinger dead and alive cat, and it's actually important to understand that Schrödinger never thought that cats could be dead and alive. All he was doing was giving a classical level example of what quantum situations would mean at the classical level. He didn't for 1 minute think that the classical world could behave in that way. In a similar way, Girardi, in a thought experiment, thinks about what would the situation be at a classical level if a chair was a quantum object in a state of being in a state of superposition. And he He writes, "What meaning can there be in a state that makes it illegitimate to think that our chair is either here or in some other place? To what macroscopic situation does this correspond?" In other words, Girard is pointing out that at the macroscopic level such states do not exist. What sense can the assertion have, which is inevitable if we do not want to deny that chairs are also physical systems subject to quantum laws? That in the state under consideration, only potentialities exist about the location of the chair. Potentialities that cannot be realized unless we carry out a measurement of position. How can it be understood that attached to these potentialities is a non-epistemic probability? Now, he uses the term non-epistemic to indicate that it's not the fact that the chair could be there, or it could be there, or here, but we don't know which one. It actually is the ontological condition of a quantum chair that it is spread, hovering between existence and non-existence in a probability space between here and there. How can it be understood that attached to these potentialities there is a non-epistemic probability that in a subsequent measurement of position the chair will be found here or there? And here comes the important point when Girardi gives a very precise description of the existential configuration that this entails, which is equivalent to asserting that before measurement was carried out, the chair could be neither here nor there, nor in both places, nor in neither place. So again, you have the here or there, neither here nor there, nor in both places, nor in neither place. In his book, Quantum Mechanics, The Quantum Mechanics of Minds and Worlds, Jeffrey Alan Barrett, in his book, The Quantum Mechanics of Minds and Worlds, cites this paradoxical configuration of existence. A neutral K-meson is typically not a K0 meson, not a negative K0 meson, not both, and not neither. And that example was given just after I gave the example from Girardi, who tells you that the existential configuration of a quantum chair would be not here, not there, nor both, nor neither. And there are other similar expressions, explanations, descriptions that the nature of quantum existence is actually to hover between existence and non-existence. I'll read a little bit from the book I'm about to publish in a few weeks, Quantum Revelations of the Real and Unreal. The subtitle, Quantum Buddhist Metaphysics Rectifies New Age Profiteering and Subtle Quantum Materialist Madness. So, we've seen the K-meson hovering between existence, then we saw the quantum chair hovering between existence and non-existence, here or there, spread between all possibilities of existence. Following quote is from Marcus Chown's book, The Never-Ending Days of Being Dead, which is about quantum theory. So what of a water droplet that hovers half in existence and half out of existence? It goes without saying that nobody has actually seen such a schizophrenic water drop. Here Chown is making the point that at the quantum level, water molecules can hover half in existence and half out of existence. It is only because there are a vast number of molecules in a water droplet that this state of hovering between existence and non-existence is eradicated. The science writer Michio Kaku, in his book Parallel Worlds, tells us the reason why molecules are stable and the universe does not disintegrate is that electrons can be in many places at the same time. Electrons can exist in parallel states hovering between existence and non-existence. And this is what holds the universe together. The fact that electrons hover between existence and non-existence means that molecules can bind together through binding together due to the molecules being in two places at the same time. This is how the universe functions, as a functioning universe. Without this quantum ability to hover between existence and non-existence, the universe could not function. It is the glue of the universe, the glue of the material world, the quantum glue. Now, interestingly, Buddhist philosophers 2000 years ago clearly stated that it was because of emptiness that the universe could function. From my book, I read, about 2000 years ago, Buddhist practitioner philosophers, using everyday observation, logical analysis, and meditation insight, came to the central conclusion that the everyday world did not exist as it appeared. The ultimate nature of all phenomena, they asserted, was that its character is neither existent nor non-existent, nor both existent and non-existent, nor neither. Furthermore, they also asserted that this existential configuration, emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, is essential for the functioning of the process of reality. If things were not empty of inherent existence, nothing could function. It is their emptiness of inherent existence that allows everything to operate satisfactorily. That's an insight from a Buddhist philosopher. If you're not taken aback by the fact that the Buddhists stated that the ultimate nature of reality is neither existent nor non-existent nor both nor neither, and suddenly you find that the existential configuration of a neutral K meson is that it's not a K0 meson and it's not a negative K0 meson, nor both nor neither, there's something wrong with you. It is extraordinary. Now, it has been claimed, for example, that such connections are just, coincidental. You know, it's just nothing to do with any kind of real connection. But think about it. If you're, I don't know, say a 2nd century fraudulent mystic, shall we say, one can imagine you going around saying, everything is one, buy my product, listen to my meditation instructions. But the idea that some fraudulent mystic is going to come up with the idea that things are neither existent nor non-existent nor both or neither is ridiculous. It's such a bizarre situation that the material world emerges from a deeper level of immaterial potentiality, which is neither existent nor non-existent nor both nor neither. Even physicists were knocked out, couldn't believe this stuff. How the hell would you think a 2nd century fraudulent mystic is going to come up with such nonsense? However, you'll find this configuration, neither existent nor non-existent nor both nor neither, is core to the quantum realm. Let us continue. So when you understand all this, the complexity, the extraordinary insight of the Buddhist philosophers, who figured out the metaphysical nature of the ultimate field of reality, which they called the Dharmadatu, 2,000 years ago, and the way it functioned and its inner existential nature completely conforms to quantum fields. When you understand this, and then you look at the utter schoolboy idiot word deception of Rovelli's stuff, you should be utterly shocked. Emptiness, which Rovelli claims is nothing, is actually a field of potentiality which hovers between existence and non-existence in exactly the same way as the quantum field does. Again, I say, you should be shocked. And I'll tell you something else which is quite shocking, to me anyway. I wrote about this stuff in my book, Quantum Buddhism, in great detail, 12 years ago. And I'm the only person to have pointed out this dramatic equivalence of existential structure. Not one person in the Buddhist community, not one person in the academic Buddhist studies community, one person in the physics community, who will come on my channel at some point. Well, he was shocked when he read my stuff and he got in touch with me immediately. But in general, my books, apart from a few people who've seen how unique they are, has been completely ignored. And a whole load of silly grifters are all over YouTube. It truly is shocking. Fortunately though, one has to just remember that things are empty of inherent existence. I think enough has been said, except leave the last remark to the Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who reiterates, emptiness is not nothingness.
But to be empty does not mean to be non-existent. And that is why he said, form is emptiness, but emptiness is form. Emptiness is not nothing. Suppose we look at this glass. It looks empty. But in order for the glass to be empty, it should be there. In order to be either full or empty, the glass should be there. So emptiness does not mean non-existent.